The journey to the Ashcroft stronghold was a blur of uncomfortable carriage velvet and Lady Cressida's sharp, whispered threats. But nothing prepared me for the castle itself. It wasn't merely large. It was a fortress carved from dark, formidable stone, smelling of old power and the sharp, clean scent of 1,000 wolves. They dressed me in Seraphine's presentation gown, a shimmering, heavy thing of ice blue silk that felt less like clothing and more like a sacrificial shroud. A maid attempted to twist my plain brown hair into an elaborate style, but it kept slipping free. I looked like a child playing dress-up, completely wrong for the gravity of the occasion. "Walk with grace, girl," Lady Cressida hissed, pinching my arm just before the guards opened the massive, iron-studded doors. "Remember, you are Seraphine. Do not stutter. Do not look him in the eye for longer than a moment. And do not, under any circumstances, disgrace our name." The doors swung inward with a thunderous echo that swallowed the blood rushing in my ears. The throne room was vast, designed to crush the ego of anyone who entered. Pillars of black marble rose to ceiling lost in shadow, and a single aisle stretched before me, ending at a massive raised dais. The air was thick with the scent of pine and raw, untamed alpha power. And there he was, King Lucian Ashcroft. Whispers had described him as a shadow of his former self, the alpha crippled by an assassination attempt 2 years prior. I had expected a broken man, tucked away and withered. I was terrifyingly wrong. He sat upon a throne of dark, unpolished wood, flanked by 2 towering, silent guards. His body was straight, motionless, but that stillness was not weakness. It was the eerie calm of a coiled predator. He was handsome, but the kind of handsome that demands respect before admiration. Dark hair fell over a severe brow, and his jawline was sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes that seized my breath. They were the color of molten gold, burning with an intelligence and intensity that swept the length of the room and pinned me instantly. They saw past the silk gown and the borrowed name, straight into the terrified, unwanted girl trembling in the doorway. I curtsied, a clumsy dip that was probably more a spasm of fear. My voice, when I finally spoke, was a reedy whisper. My king. I am Elara, Seraphine, of the Ashwood line. I am presented for the spring offering." The silence that followed was agonizing. No one spoke. Lucian did not move. He simply watched me. His gaze felt like a physical weight on my shoulders, forcing me to hold myself upright when all I wanted to do was flee. Finally, a deep, resonant voice cut through the silence. It wasn't Lucian's. "A rather pale offering, is she not, cousin?" Standing just off the dais was a man whose sneering face immediately struck me cold. He was tall, confident, and draped in rich leather, the antithesis of Lucian's still authority. This had to be Cyrus, the king's cousin, the one they said was vying for the throne. Cyrus took a step forward, his wolfish eyes raking over me. "We were expecting the vibrant Seraphine. This one looks like she spent too much time in the shadow of the pantry." Lady Cressida's breath hitched behind me, but before she could intervene, Lucian spoke. His voice was low, gravelly, and carried the undeniable weight of absolute command. It seemed to vibrate in the very stone walls. "Cyrus." The single word was a warning, sharp as a drawn blade. Lucian did not look away from me as he addressed his cousin. "You forget your place." Cyrus stiffened, a flash of resentment crossing his face before he managed a practiced smile. "My apologies, my king." Merely observing the quality of the offering. Then Lucian finally shifted his attention entirely to me. I felt the full force of his golden gaze again, but this time, there was a tiny, unsettling curiosity mixed with the power. He moved his hand, barely an inch, and gestured to a guard. "Take Lady Elara, Seraphine, to her chambers," he commanded. His eyes held mine for one final second. "She is accepted." My small victory in the solar, the king's strange approval of my honesty, did little to calm the court's skepticism. Lady Cressida, frantic over my perceived lapse in etiquette, gave me an hour-long lecture on the importance of never admitting ignorance to a king. But I couldn't forget the tiny lift of Lucian's mouth. He found artifice tedious. He wanted truth. That single exchange became the key to navigating the early weeks of the courtship. I stopped trying to mimic Seraphine's expected poise and focused on being meticulously, cautiously myself. I answered his questions about the pack laws with the studious knowledge I gained, not the practiced charm I lacked. The hardest part was dealing with Cyrus. The king's cousin treated the courtship like a prolonged performance, constantly orbiting Lucian, making veiled comments designed to undermine my position. It must be difficult for His Majesty, Cyrus purred one afternoon during a state dinner, leaning close enough for me to smell the spiced wine on his breath. To entertain a bride who is so untrained in the needs of the pack. One must be fully aware of how the alpha bond impacts a queen, especially when the king is a limited. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I remembered the king's reaction to my honesty. I met Cyrus's cold eyes. I am learning the needs of the pack through the king's instruction, Lord Cyrus, I said clearly. I am finding that true strength is not always visible in movement, but in the clarity of command. Cyrus's smile dropped. He didn't dare speak against the king's clarity of command, even indirectly. He retreated with a frustrated look, but his intent was clear. He was waiting for me to fail, and he was working to ensure that failure arrived quickly. The quiet hour. Lucian's routine was unyielding. Meetings, strategy sessions, and paperwork until the deepest hours of the night. But 3 weeks into my stay, an unprecedented message arrived from his steward. The king requests your presence in the private library at midnight. Dread coiled in my stomach. Was this it? Had he discovered the truth about Seraphine and me? I found him in a vast room stacked floor to ceiling with ancient texts. He wasn't at his desk. He was settled in a chair beside a massive stone hearth, where a low fire crackled softly. He was alone, save for 2 silent guards posted near the archway, but they were always present. The weight of his alpha aura felt different here, less formal, more intense. I curtsied deeply. You requested me, my king? Yes, Elara. He used my true name. The sound of it on his lips was electrifying. Come closer. You look like a frightened mouse hiding behind a curtain. I moved to the chair opposite him, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. I wished to speak without the usual 20 pairs of ears listening for a misstep, Lucian explained, his golden eyes fixed on the fire. Tell me about your time before the palace. I do not want to hear about the history of the Ashwood line. I want to know about you. I hesitated, my heart pounding against my ribs. Telling him about my life as an overlooked stepdaughter felt like treason against Lady Cressida's narrative. But Lucian had commanded honesty. I was quiet, my king, I finally admitted. I preferred the library to the parlor. I managed the household accounts. I had few friends. You were a ghost, he stated, his observation unnerving. I nodded, surprised by his accuracy. Yes, I was a ghost. Seraphine was the light. I was the shadow. He finally turned his gaze to me. And now you are expected to be the Luna. You are expected to be the anchor of this pack, the public strength beside the king who cannot stand. Does that not frighten the girl who is accustomed to shadows? It paralyzes me, my king. I confessed, the full weight of the pressure flooding out in a single word. Lucian's expression softened imperceptibly, the first genuine change I had ever seen in his severe features. Paralysis is a cage, Elara. It is not the end of the war, but the beginning of a different kind of strategy. He spoke about his attack, not with self-pity, but with chilling clinical detachment. The wolfsbane settled in my spine. The pack doctors tell me I may never walk. But every morning, I choose to sit on that throne. I force every lord, including Cyrus, to bow to a man they believe is useless. That is my strategy. I rule from stillness. His vulnerability, if you could call such grim determination, that was a shock. It was the first time I realized we were both trapped. He was trapped in his body, and I was trapped in this role. Why did you accept me, my king? I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. I am not the woman who was promised. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but calculation. I knew you were not Seraphine the moment you walked through those doors. The girl in the stories was bold, vain, and brittle. You are terrified, honest, and you refuse to look away when I speak. Tell me the truth, Elara. Who forced you to come here? I told him everything. About Seraphine's illness, about Lady Cressida's threats, about the need to protect my stepsister by securing the political match. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he gave a slow, deliberate nod. Good. Honesty remains your greatest weapon here. Cressida is a fool, but she has delivered me a woman who possesses something rare, loyalty to a fault. I have enough ambitious schemers. I need a Luna who knows what it means to protect others, even at great personal cost. He leaned forward just slightly. You are the replacement bride. But, Elara, I have chosen you, and I will protect you from the consequences of that choice. We will proceed with the courtship. You will be my Luna. The first attack. The king's open acceptance of me, even knowing the deception, infuriated Cyrus. The king began to assign me small, real duties, overseeing the royal kitchens, managing the pack's charity funds, tasks I was adept at, and which placed me in contact with various pack members. My confidence grew, nourished by Lucian's quiet approval. But Cyrus was not idle. One evening, during a state dinner, I was serving as Lucian's official hostess. The hall was loud, the wine was flowing, and I felt more relaxed than I had in weeks. As I was speaking to a lesser lord about the winter stores, a large dog, a massive, ill-tempered mastiff often seen guarding Cyrus's private wing, broke loose from the shadows near the entrance. It made a direct beeline for the dais. Panic erupted. Guests scattered, overturning tables and sending crystal shattering across the stone floor. The dog wasn't aiming for the king, it was aiming for the king's legs. Lucian, motionless, watched the beast approach with grim resignation. He couldn't move, couldn't rise to defend himself, and his guards were briefly blocked by the stampede of frightened courtiers. Instinct took over. I didn't think of royal etiquette or my borrowed gown. I thought only of the unfairness of the attack. I grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy, ornate silver water pitcher, and threw myself between the dog and the king's throne. I slammed the pitcher down on the dog's snout with a cry, a pure, feral noise that came from deep in my chest. The dog yelped, confused and stunned. It stumbled backward, shaking its massive head. Before it could recover, Cyrus appeared, seizing the dog's collar with a practiced jerk and dragging the animal away with a performance of shock and regret. "My sincerest apologies, Your Majesty," Cyrus exclaimed, loud enough for the entire room to hear. The beast must have slipped its lead. A rogue animal. How fortunate Lady Elara acted so swiftly. The room was silent. I stood there, panting, the water pitcher lying uselessly on the floor, my hands shaking. I was not scared of the dog. I was terrified of what Cyrus had just tried to do, and the brazen way he was now turning it into a display of his own innocence. Lucian, still perfectly still, surveyed the ruined room, the mess, and finally me. There was no praise in his eyes, only intense, assessing clarity. "Indeed," Lucian said, his voice ice-cold. "How fortunate we were." "Guards, see to it that Lord Cyrus's rogue animals are never permitted within the interior gates again. And search their kennels for wolfsbane, just to be certain. A wolf is only as strong as its packmates." He was accusing Cyrus of deliberately using the poison dog, without saying the words. Then Lucian looked at me. "Elara, you are trembling. Come here." I approached the dais, feeling every eye in the room upon my back. He reached out a hand, a large, warm hand that had the undeniable firmness of a true alpha. He took my hand and held it, drawing strength from my warmth. "You threw yourself into danger for me," he said, his voice for my ears alone. "A girl who fears shadows, protecting the crippled alpha. I misjudged you, Elara. You are more than loyal. You are brave." Holding his hand, a sense of rightness settled over me. We weren't just a political match anymore. We were two people fighting the same enemy, each tethered, yet refusing to break. The feeling was terrifying, yet deeply and irrevocably strong. Following the dog incident, the atmosphere in the palace became charged. Lucian had quietly confined Cyrus to his wing, citing a review of his security protocols. But everyone knew it was a thinly veiled threat. The wedding date was set for 1 week hence, the official end of the courtship. The clock was ticking, not just toward my coronation, but toward Cyrus's inevitable final strike. Our private moments became fewer, but deeper. Lucian was teaching me to think like a Luna, not a terrified bride. He didn't ask for affection, he asked for analysis. Cyrus believes a king who cannot stand cannot lead the pack in a hunt or a battle, Lucian told me late one night, showing me maps of the pack territory. He doesn't understand that the strength of the wolf is in the mind, Elara. My power flows from my command, not my legs. You, as Luna, must reflect that command. What if I fail the bonding ceremony? I asked, the fear finally bubbling over. What if the pack rejects me? Or worse, what if I reject the bond? Lucian's gaze was solemn. The bonding ritual is ancient. It is not just a ceremony of commitment. It is an exchange of true power. If the bond is weak, the pack will feel it, and Cyrus will seize on the instability. But you have courage, Elara. And you have honesty. Those are the foundation of my pack. The climax, the betrayal. The day before the wedding, I was in the library confirming the guest list, when Maeve appeared, her face pale with terror. My lady, you must listen to me, she whispered, pulling me toward a shadowed alcove. Lord Cyrus is not in his chambers. He slipped out hours ago. He has sent letters to the neighboring rival packs, the Black Claws and the Red Moons. He is offering them information, the location of our border's weakest points, in exchange for their aid in staging a coup tomorrow, during the ceremony. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just political maneuvering. This was treasonous betrayal that could lead to a territory war and the collapse of the Ashcroft reign. How do you know this? I demanded. I overheard his private guard speaking, Maeve insisted. He intends to strike during the most vulnerable moment, when the king is preparing for the bond. He will use the foreign attack as cover to claim the throne by right of combat. I ran, my silks catching on the furniture, straight to the king's solar. Lucian was there, calmly dictating orders to his steward. I didn't bother with etiquette. Lucian. Cyrus is gone. He's plotting a coup with the Black Claw and Red Moon packs. He plans to attack tomorrow. Lucian did not flinch. He did not ask how I knew. He simply closed the book on his lap. I know, he stated, his voice devoid of surprise. I stared at him, dumbfounded. You know? And you haven't stopped him? Lucian's eyes were cold and sharp. I have been watching him conspire for months, Elara. If I had stopped him early, he would have played the martyr. But if he acts on open treason and calls on foreign enemies, I can eliminate him completely and secure my reign with undisputed authority. He looked at the steward. Send the message. Full moon defense protocols. But keep the main pack forces hidden. Let him believe his attack will be successful. And what about the wedding, my king? Lord Alistair asked, horrified. Lucian turned to me, his expression unreadable. The wedding proceeds as planned. It will be the perfect stage for his destruction and our true beginning. The bonding ceremony. The next day, the tension was a physical presence. I was dressed in white, a gown that shimmered with silver thread, finally feeling less like a costume and more like a warrior's armor. I looked in the mirror and no longer saw the frightened shadow. I saw a woman preparing for battle, ready to stand beside her king. The great hall was decorated for the wedding, but the air was heavy with unspoken fear. Lucian was on the dais, majestic and utterly still. The ceremony began. As the pack elder recited the ancient vows, a commotion erupted outside. Distant shouts and the unmistakable scent of unfamiliar wolves, the enemy packs, floated in through the windows. Cyrus took his opportunity. Treason, he bellowed, drawing a large, gleaming dagger. The crippled king has left us vulnerable. I, Cyrus, son of the Alpha's brother, claim the throne by the right of the challenged. The pack demands a capable leader. He lunged toward Lucian. I screamed, But before Cyrus could take 2 steps, the king's plan unfolded. The 2 guards flanking Lucian, who had been motionless statues, suddenly surged forward and seized Cyrus with devastating speed. Simultaneously, the main doors burst open, but it wasn't the enemy. It was the king's hidden, elite guard, armored and ready. "The foreign packs are contained, my king," their captain shouted. They were met at the perimeter. Lucian watched Cyrus struggling against his captors, his expression cold. "Lord Cyrus, you betrayed the blood and the pack. You have forfeited your life." He did not look away as Cyrus was dragged, screaming, from the hall. The immediate, terrifying climax was over. The hall fell silent, the scent of fear replaced by the heavy scent of alpha dominance. The king had exposed his enemy and executed his justice, all without rising from his throne. He looked at me, his eyes burning with a fierce light. "The external threats are dealt with, Elara. Now, we proceed with the bond that makes us unbreakable." I walked to him, not trembling this time, but with my chin held high. I took his hand. The elder began the bonding ritual. It was not a kiss or a ring exchange, but a deep, shared commitment of power. Lucian cut the pad of his thumb with a ceremonial blade, and I did the same. We pressed our wounds together, mingling our blood. As our blood mixed, the bond took hold. It was a searing heat that began in my chest and spread, not pain, but overwhelming recognition. I felt the sharp edges of Lucian's power, his relentless determination, and his deep, hidden sorrow over his confinement. And he felt me, my quiet strength, my fierce loyalty, and the light I carried despite years of being ignored. In that moment, the alpha power anchored to me. I wasn't just his wife, I was his Luna, a partner in his power, the source of his calm. I felt his wolf recognize mine, and a tremor ran through him. Lucian, King Lucian Ashcroft, squeezed my hand tight and leaned close, his voice thick with emotion for the first time. "You were never Seraphine," he murmured, his gaze loving and absolute. "You are Elara, my queen, my anchor, the one who brought light back into this cage." The hall erupted in cheers. I stood beside him, no longer the unwanted stepdaughter, but the recognized queen. The journey had been terrifying, but standing there, hand in hand with the formidable King Lucian Ashcroft, I knew my place. I had found my purpose, not in a parlor, but on a throne, beside the crippled lion whose power I now shared. The future was full of challenges, but for the first time in my life, I was ready to face them, no longer a shadow, but a light.